Choosing the right martial arts school can change your life or your family's life for the better for the rest of your lives. The trouble is that until you get into the martial arts industry and into a school, you don't really know the things to look for and the questions to ask to make sure that this school is the right school for you. So I got together with Kris Wilder and Jeremy Lesniak, two guys with even more martial arts experience than I do, to have a real conversation about the things that you should know before you go find a martial arts school for yourself or for your children. Here today is the first half of a two-parter episode. Please do, when you're done here, go over to Jeremy's Whistlekick Radio podcast to hear part 2. And in the meantime, do consider liking us on Facebook, subscribing to the YouTube channel, or hop over to Patreon. And for just $3 a month, you can help make this channel become the thing that it can become. So thank you all for watching. Let's get to work. Everybody, welcome back to Safest Family on the Block, where knowledge is power. And joining me today are Kris and Jeremy, two martial arts podcast hosts who were kind enough to support this project in its very infancy. So real quick, Jeremy, tell us about your show and what you do.
Yeah, so I'm the host of Martial Arts Radio, and we've been going for a little while now, a few years. And my biggest passion with the show is telling stories, telling the stories of the martial arts, the martial artists, and bringing them on and showing that while so much of what we do is different, we actually have far more in common than we do that divides us. And I believe if we focus on that, good things happen.
Excellent. And Kris, how about yourself?
Martial Arts and Life is the first podcast, and that is designed to help people find things in themselves that they may not know existed in the context of the physical, the mental, the spirit, the intent of martial arts. And then there's a second podcast, which is a short 3-4 minute once a week called The Back Channel, which are just quick thoughts that might help you organize your life in a better fashion for that day, that week.
Excellent. And all three of us come to, by this time, we've got decades of martial arts training in us. We've seen the industry from almost every side of it. And one of the things that's been coming on my channel is people, listeners, viewers coming to me thinking that they should get their kids involved in martial arts. Mm-hmm. And I think all three of us would answer that with a resounding yes, yeah. Tomorrow, today, yes. But the next question is how to choose a martial arts school. And since all three of us have seen the good, the bad, and the ugly of it, I figured we should get together and have a conversation about how parents should choose a martial arts school, martial arts program for their kids.
Yeah.
And I put up a Facebook post asking parents to ask questions. And this wasn't really a question, but some advice from Stephen Barnes, who is another longtime martial artist.
Yeah.
And he advised to start with really understanding what are your goals for putting your kids in martial arts school. And while that's pretty common, one experience I had, and I'm sure you guys did as well, and I'd like us to start the conversation with this, is I know that my goals when I started training in martial arts were at best perpendicular to the best things I got out of it. That most people, when they enter martial arts or start thinking about the martial arts lessons for their kids, haven't had enough experience in martial arts to know really what their goals should be. So can we talk about that? Have we seen that with our parents? And let's start with what are the goals that we see most common in terms of what we parents want for their kids when they sign them up for lessons, those stated reasons.
Yeah, Kris, it looks like you're in a dojo, so I'll defer to you first. I just have a gray background. I'm not nearly as context relevant. So why don't you go first? I'll fill in with anything maybe after.
On my entrance form, there's a list of things to tick off to where where you say these are the things that are important goals. One of the things that's on that list, along with physical activity, increased flexibility, blah blah blah, is a traditional environment in which to learn. And I would argue that has been checked probably 95% of the time. What the parents are seeking is they're seeking a discipline. They're not looking for a Marine Corps drill instructor. They're not looking for an episode of Full Metal Jacket. But what they are looking for is they're looking for, like I like to say, ditches and fences. And that is what they seek. And oftentimes, the reason that they're doing this is it starts to happen around 6 to 7 years of age, especially for boys, because this is where they begin to separate from their mothers, as the mother not being everything anymore. And they start to exert their will a little bit. And, the parents are like, well, what should we do with this energy? And so that's how they wind up at that age in the martial arts school. But fundamentally, people are looking for rules and regulations. And again, like I said, not harsh or anything, but here's the rules. This is what we do, and when you do these things, these results happen. And so that's the biggest thing that I see coming in the door for kids. It changes a little bit, but it's still basically the same as they get older when they move tweeners, teens, and on up through there. But that's been my experience.
Yeah, I agree. I've seen a lot of those same things. I think for a lot of people, maybe not everyone, but for a lot of folks, there's an inherent observation that martial arts is a good thing. Even though every kid in the country, in the world, doesn't train, I can't imagine there's more than one degree of separation from any one kid at any time from somebody who trains. And I think that gives the parents this kind of general awareness that martial arts is there, it's an option, and it's a good thing. Now, I don't think they always know why it's a good thing, but I think on some inherent level, Kris, you refer to them as fences and ditches. I say the same thing. I call them boundaries. Kids need structure. They need those boundaries. And we inherently define ourselves as we get older by those boundaries in front of us. And they know that it's another boundary system that they can put their kid in that leads to some positive things. And what those positive things are, Jason, you called it, that they don't always know what those options are. So I think they kind of reverse engineer what those positive outcomes are. It's self-confidence, it's physical fitness, it's discipline, it's focus, it's respect. That we could make a long list. And I think when we got to the bottom of that list, I don't think we would come to any physical or personality trait that anyone would point to and say, I don't want my kid to have that. Martial arts is pretty unique in that it checks so many boxes. And there's something culturally that we have, fortunately, because without it, I don't think we'd have much martial arts anymore. It becomes a rite of passage in some areas for a large percentage of kids to go to school. A town I moved to in Vermont when I first came here, it was a rite of passage for just about every kid in this 5,000 person town to go to this Taekwondo school.
Yeah. Wanted to piggyback off of something Kris said about that structure, about that traditional learning environment. One of the things I noticed when I ran my school, we had the kinder class, right? The 4 and 5-year-olds who met for like 20 minutes. And the superpower that they got was before entering kindergarten, they were in an environment where they learned how to stand where you're supposed to stand and listen. And that was expected of them and modeled for them. And then once they got into kindergarten, because the first 2 months of kindergarten is teaching all the kids to stand where they're supposed to stand, sit where they're supposed to sit, and pay attention and listen. And so they got identified early as smart, as apt. And as we all know, unfortunately, the earlier you get identified as that, the more likely you are to do well in school. Where if your kindergarten teacher writes you off as a problem, then your first grade teacher is going to talk to them in the break room and make assumptions about you that early.
Yeah.
And so that even with the very young kids, that introduction to structure, that introduction to a traditional learning environment can spell success very early.
I'm with you. I agree.
Yeah, that's just that's the Pareto distribution, and that's what's going to happen. And those that have will get more. And it's just what you said right there. And the martial arts helps those that may not have the best circumstances to actually create those circumstances for themselves, not even consciously knowing it, because they are doing exactly what you're talking about. It's like they may have monkeys and bell whistles going off in their head, but they know how to stand still and look at you when you're speaking to them. That is interpreted as focus and paying attention, and it gets fed. You look at pro athletes in whatever sport it is. They got identified early, they got fed early, they got all of the cream, they got the frosting on the cake. And we don't really realize that it's happening until you take that observation. So martial arts is actually outside of that flow and outside of that stream of the regular school where this Pareto distribution happens, and it allows kids to find things in themselves, to excel, and to get really good, and to get confidence, and to walk away and go, hey, you know what, that kick wasn't working so well tonight when I started, but I got it right. I do. And those things innately go into them, and they climb in the car, in the back of the car, and they're a little puffed up, and the next day is better, and the next day is better, and they're able to break out and at least run parallel to that distribution that's already in the school system. Those are my fevered ramblings on that.
What's the Pareto distribution? I'm not familiar with this.
Well, what it is it's also called the Matthew rule, which is to those that have much more will be given. So that's what it is. It's Pareto is an economic distribution of it. The Matthew is more social, but it's the same thing.
Got it.
There's an interesting write of it in Malcolm Gladwell's Outliers, where he points out that the overwhelming majority of NHL hockey players were born in the month immediately after the age cutoff for joining the youth hockey leagues. So, because those kids start at 5 or 6 or 7. So, if you're a year older than the other kids in that class because you just missed the cutoff,
you're dominating.
Yeah, you're dominating. That you get identified as talented when all you really are is age appropriately developed.
Right.
And then that ends up creating a hockey career.
And that's one of the things that I think is so significant about the martial arts, is that it allows the in-betweeners to find something that runs parallel to that they can follow. I've got a friend of mine who's a martial arts guy, and he said, you know why karate is more popular than kung fu? You know why taekwondo is more popular than kung fu? And I said, no, I don't know. And he said, it's the belts. He said, it's the belts. It's an opportunity to see the next thing in front of you, the next goal. It's goal oriented. That's what we live in. This is our society. And so when you have a belt system, instead of, 1 or 2 sashes, or maybe just a uniform with frog buttons on it, you're able to instantly know where you stand in your group and what the next step is. And he said, that's the value. And I walked away gobsmacked and went, yeah, you're right. So.
Yeah, I'd agree.
So the question that comes up next most likely, or next most frequently after, what are your goals, is the parents come to me and ask, okay, so what style should I get my kids in? Now, I have an opinion about this, and I'm curious if you guys agree or disagree, want to drum me out of the core. And that's just, doesn't matter, especially when dealing with kids, that the style is so much less important than the particular instructor, that the culture of that school is a good match for your family and what you need to get out of it, that whether it's kung fu or karate or Krav Maga or jiu-jitsu really doesn't matter much.
I agree. It is the least important question.
Your brevity is staggering. I'll tease this out a little bit more.
Yeah.
If I came to you, if you were my dad, Jeremy, I said, hey, I'm going to move to Arizona, and I'm going to go to Arizona State University because they have the program that I want. You'd be like, okay, all right, well, let's see how this works. Let's go to it. But if I said to you that I was going to move to China because there's the best Tai Chi there, you'd say, wait a minute, kid, you got to check yourself. You're losing your mind. And so we'll we'll think nothing of traveling, 3,000 miles to go to where we believe there is an education system, but we won't do that for the martial arts. And invariably what happens is that everybody just happens to have the greatest martial arts school in the world just 7 miles down the road.
Right.
And that's great, really. I mean, because that's a great attitude to have. It's not wrong. But realistically, it's not. It's just like the person who went to Vegas. Everybody who goes to Vegas, well, they broke even. Well, no, they didn't. Vegas is not built on break even. It's like, well, yeah, but when you figure out, I got a really good deal on the flight, I got a really, they work it out. So it's always a reverse engineering. It's the same thing with a martial arts school. The point is that I agree with you that it doesn't make any difference what you're doing. It's about proximity and regularity and a good environment. Proximity, regularity, and a good environment. Now we'll talk a lot about environment because that's a multinodal, aspect of this. But really, if you're not showing up, if you're not consistent, it doesn't make any difference what it is in life. It is not valuable at that point. You've decided it's not valuable. You're not showing up and you're not getting the rewards and the benefits from it. You're start and stop and go, and it's not good. Proximity, regularity, good environment.
And
an
logistics.
A-school. Yeah, an A- school that's 20 minutes from your house is better than an A+ school that's 40 minutes away, especially when it's for your kids.
Yeah.
A
no
D
question.
school is better than one you're not going to go to.
Yeah,
An F school is better.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, I would agree with you. I would go so far as to say exactly what you said. A D school, yes. I would rather have you do that than go to that school that's a million miles away and show up, bi-monthly.
I used to come tri-weekly, and now I try weekly to get to class.
I like it. I like it.
Consider that stolen with no attribution.
Excellent. And that gets to kind of the meat of the episode too, about you got A schools, B schools, D schools, and then F schools, which we can agree can actually do harm. And it's because there are some pretty bad schools, and it's better to train somewhere else. And I think it'll be good to get there, and you can even get something out of some of them. But most bad experiences, you can get something out of if you walk in fully awake and aware. But anyway, let's get there.
All right, let's do it.
Starting with so what are the you walk into a school and you're trying to decide if this school is a good fit or if it's a good school, if it's A school, B school, C school. We've already established that it's within 20 minutes of the house. What are the things to look for walking in the door, starting those conversations with the staff? What should we look for walking in?
I think the research process starts before you even walk in the door. I think there's an important component involving social media and website at this point, because a lot of schools inevitably, most people who are making the decision to put their kid into martial arts have choice. There are some areas, I live out in the sticks. I'm in Vermont. There are plenty of people who are traveling 45 minutes to an hour to the closest school. So some of these things don't always apply here and other areas in the country, but the majority of people, just based on population, are going to have choice. And in a lot of schools, especially in cities where there's a lot of competition, you've got these systems in place, and they know, we're going to make sure that we greet these people. And there are all these wonderful things that, if you've ever worked retail, might seem very familiar. But what happens on the website may be a little bit different. When you read through, say, the bio of the head instructor, does it read like a resume of these ego-based accomplishments? If that's what was permitted to go on the website, it is going to be at least mildly reflective of the culture within the school. And so I think that process, what's going on social media? If they have, 5,000 likes on Facebook and they post what seems to be good stuff and nobody clicks like or comments, that says something. Does it necessarily say something bad? No, but it may speak to what is available as community. And, you know, I'm going to guess you both would agree with me that the strength of the community within a martial arts school is a huge indicator of retention and thus long-term effective training.
Would absolutely agree.
Yeah, one of the things that Jeremy brought up there is a big thing, and that's that resume. You know, I've got a bunch of books. I got some awards. No one cares. No one cares. You know, it's just, it's all about the immediate experience right there. So if, you know, and I want to dive a little deeper into what you said, Jeremy, because I think it's valuable, is that if you go on that website and you're doing your pre-research, and everybody does now, and you know, you can be fairly adroit at some of the things you're seeing, like are there likes and so forth. But when I see that that resume, you know, is a, you know, 5th degree master of this and studied under, you know, Bob Schweenwacker of da 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 da. I don't care. I don't care. It makes utterly no difference to me at all. As a parent of a child, I want my child to have a fantastic experience and learn something. And when I say something, most of them really don't know what they want to learn. They think they've got a general direction, and that's fine. It's a new environment, but man, it's all about what is going on with that relationship with the instructor, the floor, the mat, and the student. And man, if you walk into that place and you go through the procedure, you get greeted. It's pleasant. It's all of these kinds of things. You know, there's intake and blah, 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 and a few questions and all that kind of stuff. Look past that. Look out onto the floor. Take a look and see if there is joyful practice out there. That's good. If there's not joyful practice, if it's dour and rigid, go find someplace else, because I'm going to bet you that if you get dour and rigid, it's going to match with that resume that Jeremy was talking about, you know, I'm this and that and the other thing. I'm not interested in building an army of winter ninja. I'm interested in building people that will be decent spouses, wonderful parents, pillars of their community, and be able to build a better world, one brick at a time. And so if you're building that army of winter ninja, it's not good. That's what I say. Look at the floor.
You used an important term,
Jeremy's
Kris.
I
want to go back because there's something that I'm imagining that Jason, that some of the intent of this episode is that non-martial artists will listen and they will take some information from it. And so there's a term that you use, Kris, that I think is really important: joyful practice. Because if you're not someone who is trained, you might hear that and think, okay, so I'm looking for a school where all the kids on the floor are smiling and playing games and jumping around and it looks like play. And that's not necessarily the case, because, you know, we've all trained long enough. Jason, you and I can spar. I can punch you in the face and we can have fun in that exchange, potentially, right? But I could also punch you in the face and neither of us enjoy that process at the same time, right? It's I bring it back to culture. There's community, whatever you want to call it. There is something to be said for it, and it's hard to define, but it's pretty easy to recognize.
It's almost a little, because you're walking, you kind of, you're taking the vibe of the place, man.
Yes,
Right?
but if you look at look at the energy level of the instructor. If you're teaching kids and your energy level is like this, okay, everybody go ich, ni, son. Or if you have someone who's really excited, they're really engaged. All right, guys, left leg back. And you can run classes with the most boring drills with young kids. But if you're energized, you're there with them, you're pumped up, it's a good environment. you could also play games and teach them nothing in a boring way, and nobody gets anything out of it.
That touches on one of the things that I consider the most important, because you can have a great school with a great teacher who just doesn't like teaching kids.
Yep.
And there's a lot of schools everywhere, and there's a lot of schools where teaching the kids class is the assignment of the youngest, the least senior instructor on the staff, who's doing it to make his bones.
Or even a punishment.
Yeah. Where, on the other hand, if in a great school, you find the person who just gets fed by it, who walks off the deck after teaching 35-year-olds for half an hour with more energy than they walked onto the deck with. And it's rare. I wouldn't say that not finding that's a deal breaker, because it's kind of rare to find a school with that person. But if you find a school with that person teaching the kids classes the age of your kids, you have found gold, and you should definitely put it on the top of your consideration list.
To say it another way, if we look at all those things, make sure you look at the beginning of class, get there before class starts, and stay after it ends. Because that's when those transition points, stepping onto the floor and stepping off the floor, are going to be really enlightening. Do those kids step off the floor and they run up to mom or dad and they're like, "Did you see me?" or "Look what I learned," and they're really pumped up? As well as at the beginning of class, are all of the parents having to push the kids out onto the floor to get them started? You know, one or two. I mean, if you've worked with a kid, if you have a kid, if you've known a kid for more than 10 minutes, you know that even things that they love to do once in a while, they're not going to be super pumped to do. So there are exceptions. But if it's most kids versus one kid, you know, these little things are all clues that you can stack up to get a sense as to what's going on.
Absolutely. Chris, you got something to add there?
Well, I like what he's talking about, Jeremy. You bring it up. I say it this way. I say, look at the seams. Don't look at the fabric. Look at the seams, because that's going to tell you, those transition points are going to tell you more than you're ever going to learn observing a class. Now, most people don't function that way. You know, they don't look at the seams. They look at the cloth, you know, and that's a mistake, because you'll learn more in that 30 seconds when they step off the mat or step onto the mat than you'll learn really watching an entire class. You'll see what you need to see.
If we carry that analogy out, clothing usually fails at the seams.
That's true.
Boom! Somebody just dropped the mic. Yeah.
I would, but it's on one of those arms. I can't. I could lower it quickly. It's about as much as I'm gonna get.
That works.
That's a great one. That's great addition. Great addition.
Thank you. You're setting them up. I'm knocking them out.
Jeremy, you brought up earlier social media, and I think that's I hadn't thought of it before the show, but I think that there's a lot of what we're talking about that you can see there about the energy level, what they're posting, something even as simple as, are the overwhelming majority of posts about the instructor and the instructor's accomplishments and ego, or are they posts about the awesome kids in their school? Are they posts that are celebrating an accomplishment that one of the students had outside of the school?
Sure.
You know, are they mentioning the valedictorian? Are they mentioning the kid who raised funds in their school, you know, for their high school's dance, as opposed to the instructor's most recent medal?
Exactly. And, you know, the interesting thing is that we end up, depending on whether social media is used as a recruitment tool or a retention tool, you end up with different sort of flavors on social media. And as a recruitment tool, you may not be able to suss out quite as much what the culture is, but as a retention tool, you know, absolutely you can. Are they talking about the students? Are they talking about the instructors? Is it positive? Is it competitive focused? You know, there are kids, especially the older they get, that they start to develop more and more their personality. They may do well in a more competition focused school versus a non-competition focused school. some kids thrive on this, some don't. It doesn't mean that the other things that we're talking about are irrelevant, but as you start to have more and more choice and narrow down, because I've done this exercise for people, the very thing that we're talking about, listeners, I'm going to guess, Jason, Kris, you've done this for other people too, a student that's moving away. Can you help me look at school options and maybe choose a few? I don't look at, let's say 5 or 6 and say, that's the one. I say, here are the 2 not to go to, go check out the other 4, that sort of a thing. It's attrition and what's left standing. So none of these things I think that we've talked about really are deal breakers. I don't think we've hit any deal breakers yet. Areas of concern, maybe.
Yeah. Things that make it, like a lot of things, like a self-defense situation. There are very few times you'll see a situation and go, oh, hell, but here's a point of information. Here's another point of data. Here's a third thing. And that means it's time to leave the bar.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
And I feel like it's the same way when you're assessing a martial arts school. But on that topic, let's go ahead and transition to what are some red flags? I want to start. We had talked about style being, utterly unimportant. I think it's important though to recommend against. There's a certain species of MMA dojo that is great for late teens, guys in their 20s. That doesn't necessarily. It's an outlier from a lot of the martial arts culture and values that we've been talking about here. And there's nothing wrong with them for what they do, but it is rarer that those schools will serve the goals that most parents have for their kids.
I think when we talk about anything that's MMA, the number one thing that I'm going to look for, and I'm not, I am not an MMA advocate. I am a traditional martial artist. I draw a thick black line between the two. I catch flack for it, might catch flack for saying it here, and I'm okay. I'm willing to engage on that conversation. But the thing that I think everyone can agree with is if there is a likely chance for youth to incur traumatic brain injury, concussions, CTE, whatever you're going to call it, in a training environment, that is the reddest of red flags, and you should run. Nothing else offsets that.
Kris, what do you think?
Well, I draw that line as well. There are in Seattle, where I'm located. I did a market research of what is available, and there are 13 martial arts at various levels of different structures within a 3-mile radius of my school.
Wow.
That's 13. And many of them are popping up that are, the MMA stuff. And I don't have anything against it. That's fine. But I do draw that line just like Jeremy does. And, it can be looked at from a condescending view from both sides of that line. I'm not interested in that. What I want to tease out, and Jeremy, I'm going to put words in your mouth, so please, feel free to adjust that and correct it. But if you're doing MMA and it's reasonably structured, in other words, it's not a lot of injury-prone type stuff, please go ahead and knock yourself out and enjoy it. I mean, because young men like wrestling, young men like football, young men like they like these contact, rough and tumble kind of things. And these martial arts schools that are the MMA schools that kind of pop up around me, well, they pop up and they go away because their business plan is based on, the love of competition. And that works really well between the ages of 17 and 27. But I don't know about you, but when I was 23, I didn't have 2 nickels to rub together, so you've got an issue. You've got a high level of competition, and you've got potential for some injury, and that happens regardless. But when Jeremy's talking about the CTE and things like, I don't do judo anymore. I don't do judo anymore because I had a detached retina. that counts. Okay.
Yeah.
I guess we're done doing that now. But I'm an adult and I can make those choices and so forth. So, when I see parents going, well, he's going to do MMA and he's going to do competition. Well, yeah, okay. But, you better measure that pretty tight, because there's an entirely different set of risks that can go sideways really fast that are in that group. And it could be anything from a overly macho instructor to somebody who doesn't have the thoughts and concerns for their training partner that they should. All of these kinds of things. And one of the key points that I like to look at when I'm looking at like an MMA, a jiu-jitsu, or a judo dojo, which are heavy contact, is what are the injuries like? Because if they're like, we train hard, we train 100%, we train hard, and it's like, yeah, no professional sport does that. It's all save for game day. Any coach that would be having their guys walking around in casts and slings would be fired. They wouldn't even make it in the next day, because you're destroying our business plan. And that's sort of a crass way to put it, but ultimately, I think that those are the things that I take into consideration when I look at these higher risk, higher contact kind of experiences. There is value there, but you got a little bit more intensity, I guess, in what the choice is going to be and how it's going to be measured, and the risks and the benefit reward on that. So those are my thoughts on it.
Thank you for watching today, but you were only half done. Please do take the time to head on over to Whistle Clip Radio and hear part 2 of this important interview. Thank you for watching today. If you get the chance, head on over to Facebook or Patreon. Support us in any way you can. Stay safe, everybody. Bye for now.